All right, the entity is in relevant position. The people of the state, many of whose addresses I've documented on Google, just so you can see everybody who lives in the zone of relevant position. Those who live in the crime scene, in other words, that is the amplified audible activity. It's the method of monitoring me right now inside of the private space while you're looking at the magnified light that's piercing through what are closed blinds. And you can see this rod as it was moving back and forth. You could see the light that was changing. That creates light activity. That's the significance of having engineered light. This is what the demon-possessed, the people of the state engage in on an ongoing basis, as you see the engineered light that covers the ground, and as the entity is maintaining another source of engineered light, which is the maintenance of a light source, which is not possibly the sun. And I also want you, again, to pay attention to the time. So yesterday, which was March 5th, 2024, walking out of my office and capturing the video of what is the engineered light that covered the buildings. I was facing building 1800, and you saw the impossible light activity, and the entity suggesting that sunlight would remain in close proximity over the property of, in perfect alignment to, never leaving, in other words, the property of Alvarado Gardens and the zone of relevant position around Alvarado Gardens for the duration of the day, such that light is hitting those buildings and then reflecting across the parking lot to hit building 1800. That was impossible light activity, and that's the same impossible light activity that's inside of my apartment right now. This is the same impossible light, engineered light that is, that covers the grounds. And this is the exposure of what is actually a demonic environment. It has nothing to do with the operation of the natural environment. In the same way that you saw during the day yesterday, as I was documenting the third-party group stalker who was illegally parked on the grounds, who was group stalking. They were at the crime scene and doing so as a visitor of another third-party group stalker. That's just the surface. The entity is engaged in P.O.C. and they were present engaged in P.O.C. in the specific environment. And as I documented that white Camry at 8:13 in the morning, you saw the light source hovering over me, you saw my shadow in front of me, and you saw my shadow behind me. And the same light activity occurred at nightfall when I walked outside, and you saw my shadow in front of me and you saw my shadow behind me. This is engineered light. This is a demonic environment that is always present, and it has nothing to do with what is the illusion that I'm breaking down for you. The light that appears on the ceiling in my living room at nightfall, when I show you the ongoing maintenance of engineered light inside of my private space, it is speaking to the environment that surrounds, where criminal monitoring is ceaselessly underway. Criminal monitoring is a gross and very violent sex offense. It's committed by a public entity. So this is a sex offender that has yet to be recognized under existing state and federal laws. That is going to change. You also have what is the people of the state that are going to be prosecuted as violent sex offenders, and this is based on the nature of the crime that they are perpetrating against a targeted individual that they're engaged in group stalking and monitoring against in concert with the public entity. That beeping sound was the irrelevant position using a dumpster truck. The green dumpster truck, so that's either waste management or Burtec in relevant position, flashing lights while they're in relevant position, in the zone of relevant position, and their use of that truck as amplified noise while I am showing you what is the presence of impossible light inside of my apartment. Light that would never occur under natural circumstances, and also light that is impossible to occur would never occur if that was the sun that was captured over the Ovitt Family Community Library in perfect alignment with me in Ontario, California at the same exact time, and remaining there over my head and at the entrance, over through the inside and through the back, through all angles in that library for the duration of the day. This is the nature of the documentation that already exists. So you have what is the ongoing mutually exclusive documentation that exists, in addition to what is clearly outside of the bounds of nature, both in the Inland Empire at any one of the addresses that I've documented, which are facilitating venues where I was subject to the pattern of conduct, showing, again, piece by piece, what is a state system. Everywhere that I go, you have this phenomenon. It is showing piece by piece, as you put that together, the state is engaged in a system, and it's a very specific phenomenon. You have the maintenance of this light source at 6:40 in the morning, and at 5:01 p.m., the entity is engaging in the same exact manner. The light source on the opposite side of the parking lot at Alvarado Gardens at 1800 North Alvarado Street, and you saw what is the engineered light inside of my apartment covering the apartment buildings of the same exact property. That is a phenomenon. It's impossible, but you are also looking at the character of that light. This is the pattern of conduct, and it is an ongoing admission by the entity that is a sex offender, a violent sex offender. The entity is engaging in what is ongoing surveillance, an ongoing molestation of your person. I want to be clear, I'm placed under surveillance and molested with directed light while I walk inside of my private space. It's also occurring while you're outside, but I want you to understand the nature of the violation. This is serving a criminal system. It's highly demented. It's demonic in nature, and this environment is maintained while I have to walk around in here. I also do so while I'm physically indisposed, engaging in personal activity, and the entity, as I've shown you, at every doorway, under every covered hallway, the impossible maintenance of what is engineered light. While the entity is stalking with light, the entity is necessarily molesting with light, engaged in an obsessive endeavor to not only surround but to touch. Understand the perpetual sex offense. The people of the state also mimic this demonic behavior. They like to engage in what is crossing paths with the ongoing phenomenon of engineered light, but they also engage in what is touching you with the method of their own light activity, such as headlights. Right, this is the demon possessed that engage in this behavioral pattern that's heavily documented as well. But I just want you to understand and make that connection. The stalking with light in the path is a pattern, and this is what's occurring in the environment. And while the entity is touching me, again, while I'm physically indisposed, while I don't have any clothes on, understand the nature. This is serving a criminal system, and the entity is touching my person with this engineered light. So that's another level of violation that the law is going to recognize. And it is committed by every single person, the people of the state, each of whom will be prosecuted by address, by name, by company name. They are engaged in what is a criminal offense of an unprecedented nature in concert and on behalf of a public entity, and that's exactly what they will be prosecuted for and as, because that's what they're doing. And so understand that the entity is engaging in a sex offense of an unprecedented degree, but it's also speaking to what are levels. Okay, multifaceted layers of harm and damage and violation to the ordinary sensibilities of any person, all right, subject to this. And so I'm one that not only am I subject to it, I realize it, and I'm documenting it. And so this is speaking to what is an ongoing harm, as yes, I'm speaking to how you prosecute it and teaching those how to identify it. But that's a peculiar harm, all right, which civil and criminal law is going to recognize and compensate for. But I want to be clear, it is that which is an exponential. Now, you can't put a dollar amount, in other words, on the harm that an entity is inflicting while engaging in this, while you have to look at it, but yet I have to remove my clothes and walk around and handle what I have to do, all right? And the entity is touching and invading in such a ridiculous manner. I mean, the fact that it's so clearly impossible is also speaking to the level of violation that the target individual suffers. Right, seeing the lights, seeing the shadows on your ceiling, seeing the multiple shadows all around while you're trying to go about getting ready for work and you have to take your clothes, you're feeling like you want to cover yourself, you're under surveillance. So I just want you to, for 1 second, place yourself in the mind of the target individual. This is going toward the prosecution of not only the entity, but also our TED speaker, our Todd speaker is the entity. He's a criminal facilitator. His property is used, his company is used, his very employees are third-party group stalkers. He is a group stalker, and he will be responsible for the civil and criminal damages suffered, and he's going to be prosecuted as such. And so this is something that I want to point out. I want to be clear, it's 6:49, and the documentation you're going to look at, it's an ongoing documentation because it's an ongoing ceaseless system, and it's serving for that very severe prosecution of the people of the state, the vicarious arm of the entity, the state of California, that is engaged in federal group stalking and monitoring. That's why the phenomenon is inside of my private space. It is understanding and recognizing what is a perpetual sex offense, all the ways in which the entity is violating you by virtue of keeping you under surveillance by an entity. All right, by virtue of the methods that are employed in keeping you under surveillance and group stalking you, it's sexually violent, sexually motivated, sexually perverted. It's sexually violent by virtue of the numerosity, because an entity, a whole bunch of people that you know and don't know, it's weird beyond measure, just to put it in plain terms. Yes, it's a sex offense of an unprecedented nature. All right, and it is that which is not heard of. And again, that's speaking to a matter of injustice where the entity is doing that which it intended to never be discovered. The malice of the system, let me be clear, this is also something you're going to recognize at prosecution and when awarding damages to the target individual. The entity intended to discard the target individual, engaged in such alarming and demented conduct as an entity, bullying someone, that it was so demented and twisted that even speaking to it, trying to address it, trying to place words and articulate what they're subject to, much of which they may not even understand, is supposed to sound like they're crazy. It's supposed to sound like they are disturbed. That's malice. That's relevant when you are awarding damages for federal group stalking and monitoring. That's relevant when you're prosecuting the group stalkers. That's relevant, okay? So it is currently 6:50 a.m. and the entity maintained a light source on the opposite side of the same exact address, meaning the state of Florida never saw the sun. That's exactly what that means. That's a scientific fact. It's impossible that the state of Florida ever had the sun in their sky space. It never left the position of the parking lot area at Alvarado Gardens as of 5:01 p.m. All right, and that's just the reality of things, and that's also why you document. But again, the larger implications are, in the state of Florida, they're looking at sunny skies all day long, every day. I've lived in Florida. It's sunny every single day. And the question is, and I'll leave that with you, because I'm documenting and I'm exposing darkness, I'm exposing the demonic, I'm exposing corruption by government. It's not just the state of California. The demonic is not limited to the jurisdiction of California. This is what's going on in this country, and there are even greater implications because you're talking about the rest of the world. All right, but I will digress. I'm not going to go there. But it goes without saying, in the state of Florida, they're looking at a sun in their sky space, but it's impossible that the one sun that we have remains stationary over in alignment to, not only just here, but in alignment to me, the entities group stalking, at the address of Alvarado Gardens at specifically, I'm inside of 1806 North Alvarado Street at this time, at 1810 North Alvarado Street at 5:01 p.m., the entity in its light source, in its zenith, as you saw my shadow. It's not at a far distance, it's right there over me. That's when you see the immediacy of my shadow. That's always the pattern of conduct. I told you it rises in alignment to me. It remains over my head all day, and it sets in alignment to me. And all those around in relevant positions, that's a group stalker, are engaged in the state's criminal system of federal group stalking and monitoring. That's the environment that they maintain around the targeted individual, and it is a phenomenon in and of itself. It is the prima facie case. It is also speaking to direct evidence. 5:01 p.m., and you have what is approximately 6:30 in the morning. All right, so let's count the hours. That's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 11 hours where the sun is remaining at one address, over one address. That's a scientific impossibility. In addition to that, you have what is not possibly sunlight. All right, and that is the prima facie case. That is what is federal group stalking and monitoring. And this phenomenon, and this under this illusion of where you are under the false impression, where you're not even paying attention, you're just assuming that you don't even think about it. And now I want to be clear: society is designed such that you're too busy on your social media, whatever. And I'm not judging you; do whatever you want to do. But this life, especially in California, life is so quick, like it's so demanding. It's designed for you to not pay attention. Okay. So you're not paying attention to your environment, you're not paying attention to what's hovering over you. And then the implications of that, well, if this is the light source that's remaining over my head all day long, and I want to be clear, you're in Northern California, you're looking at a light source in the sky above you, that's impossible because I'm documenting what is maintaining ubiquitous presence over the property of Alvarado Gardens. What's remaining here, you cannot see from Northern California, but yet you're looking at a light source there. It's impossible. All right, so I just want to point out what is the demonic. It's a phenomenon, and it's entirely demonic, and it's serving a state system. This is exposing those who are walking in darkness. And this darkness, we're not in a church. I'm not preaching. It's criminal. You're going to prosecute for the demonic behavior that they are engaging, exacting toward an American citizen who has a constitutional human right to not be subject to it. All right? All right, it's currently 6:54 a.m., and this is P.O.C. Don't be fooled by this. The concentrated light, first of all, the fact that it ever occurred is speaking to the pattern of conduct. The pattern of conduct does not just cease to exist because the concentrated method of engineered light disappears, but I want to be clear, it's still here. And second of all, you also remember that there are layers of engineered light. This is my magnified size of my shadow. All right, it's called light activity, actually. Everything that the entity is doing once it is surrounded with what is the evidence of what is existing, all right, you're talking about the inevitability of a prosecution. Darkness is in no way escaping being exposed, in other words. All right, and this is just this long time coming. It's 6:54 a.m., and this is P.O.C.